those who are at the back. I quoted one statistic yesterday, and this morning I'd like to share a few more with you. The original research that sort of started the ball rolling as far as statistics on this issue are concerned came from the research that was done by Todd Johnson at Gordon Conwell University. I have the link there for you at the bottom, and this PowerPoint will be sent to anybody who wants it afterwards. And they said, and it was released at the first GPRO Congress in 2016 in Thailand. Some of you may have been there. The next one, the second one, will be next month in Canada. So if you haven't enrolled yet, I encourage you to do that. They said that only 5% of all the pastors in the world, whether Protestant, Catholic, you know, only 5% had a formal qualification, namely a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. So the reality check is this. At that stage, only 2.2 million evangelical pastoral leaders were in existence globally. Some put it as high as 3.4 million. My current estimate would be around 4 million, and we'll see why a bit later. Only 5% had received formal training. The Global Alliance for Church Multiplication, GACX, that's a church planting group of bodies, has as its mission a church for every 1,000 people. Now, by 2050, the world's population will be 9.7 billion people. So their aim would equate to 9.7 million pastors by the time 2050 is around. A university in Brazil in 2019 concluded after they had done extensive research that there were 17 new churches planted every day in Brazil. Dr. Nelson Mpanda, who spoke earlier today, did some independent research here in Kenya and concluded that 76% of Kenyan pastors are untrained. 76%. This statistic I showed you yesterday, and actually Michael quoted it recently in one of his presentations that I was part of, and that was that in the US there is one pastor for every, he said 230, I've seen 250, yesterday we heard 200 people in the US. And around the world, the estimate is that there's one trained pastor for every 450,000 people. Dr. Thomas Shernoff, the General Secretary of the World Evangelical Alliance, estimates that there are 15,000 new baptized believers every day in the world. And that would mean that if you took, say, 50 of those to form a new church, you would need roughly 1,000 new pastors every day. So the need is great. And Re-Forma hopefully helps to bring a solution to that huge need. The statistics are mind-boggling. I read this yesterday, but it's important that I read it again. The majority of church leaders globally are untrained or inadequately trained, which has led to a multitude of abuses. We've seen some of that in Kenya recently, where a pastor led his congregation into the bush and they all starved to death, and more than 300 graves of people have been found dead. A multitude of abuses, of bad teaching and heresies. Re-Forma remedies this by providing a global biblical ministry standard which is based on measurable competencies and aimed at developing Christ-like leaders. So the vision is to ensure that millions of pastors and church leaders are biblically trained by providing a recognized global standard for outcome and impact-based assessment. What's always amazed me is that theology and biblical ministry training, the only profession where you don't have to be qualified, you don't have to register, you can just open your church and start. Whereas with other professions, you have to reach a certain standard, for example, in the medical profession, and you have to belong to a body, and very often you have to do continuing professional development points every year. But in ministry, for thousands and thousands of years, we've just allowed people to do their own thing. And that has created absolute chaos in the church. My statement, the biggest crisis in the church today is the crisis of untrained and undertrained pastors. Because what happens on a Sunday morning in the pulpit is disastrous for the church. And it's only going to get worse. So if we have to add up all the students who are currently in theological training, whether they be in universities, seminaries, or Bible colleges that are accredited, it only comes to 5% of the total need currently. But with the increase in pastors that are needed every year, for example, GACA says that they are planting 1 million churches a year. With that increase in the need for pastors, that 5% is soon going to become 4%, 3%, 2%, 1%. And by the time 2050 comes, the total number of students in theological training in accredited programs is going to be infinitesimally small. And that's a massive crisis for the church. And I would appeal to those of you who are in formal theological education. As I sat listening here yesterday to a very vibrant discussion on this topic, to think very carefully about that statistic. Because the reality is that the need is in non-formal theological education. I come from formal. I was the president of a seminary. But I've realized that the need is not there. Yes, we need those people. We need thinkers. We need professors. That will never change. But the need on the ground right now is in non-formal theological education. We learned lots about quality assurance in this seminar, helping to unify, simplify, and complement the numerous ministry training programs. Dr. Cole mentioned yesterday there could be as many as 100,000. Providing a platform for outcome and impact-based assessment and encouraging and supporting startup programs. The majority of the 2,210 groups that are now enrolled as Re-Forma are from startup programs. People who just want in their church or in their mission organization or community to start a program to train up or to help train pastors in the non-formal sector. People often ask us, what do you believe? Well, that's a really important question. And so we tell them that we subscribe to the Lausanne Covenant and the Statement of Faith of the World Evangelical Alliance. You can't read these names, I know, but I put them up there because this is the International Board of Re-Forma. And if you're a bit closer, you'll get it in the presentation afterwards. You'll see that these are all significant leaders from many, many parts of the world who are forming the board of Re-Forma. The same is true of the advisory council. So we have an advisory council from respected leaders around the world who advise us on certain topics. So yesterday I said, how did these outcomes come about? Well, you now know that after that conference at the end of 2016, Dr. Cole assembled a team of people from around the world who came voluntarily to the first meeting, and then there were a number of meetings after that, and they were posed a very simple question. What does a pastor need to be able to know, to do, and to be in order to be declared competent? And they came up with 35 competencies, and to each of those competencies we attached an outcome. Hence the 35 outcomes which now form the standard that people have to subscribe to if they want to be awarded the certificate. These are very simple, and they can be used by existing providers. They can even be used by formal providers. And I know Ben Stroud has a planned to put to his university the idea of testing his graduates as to whether they can actually do the 35 outcomes. We've had 2 PhDs go through the program, and they both confessed to me that they were not able to do all 35 outcomes for themselves. Or they can be used by providers who already have a curriculum, in which case they just have to do the outcomes that they do not do in their own program. I read this statement yesterday, and what's important about this statement is that a learning outcome has a goal at the end, and it's the facilitator's responsibility to take them through a journey to get them to the point where they can actually demonstrate the outcome. It's not like traditional education where at the end of 12 months you write an exam, and if you fail, you have to redo it. It's not like that. Here the facilitator has to intervene when he can see that the student is not yet competent. That's the definition, not yet competent. And then help that person to get to the place where they can actually be declared competent and get the certificate. So these are very basic, biblical, simple, global, affordable, sustainable. Yesterday I said they were categorized into 5 areas, and I mentioned what those areas are. I know you can't read that from the back, so I'll have to intervene here and just share with you some of the outcomes. So I mentioned one yesterday, but under the heading of knowing the scriptures, which we call knowing the scriptures because it's a nice simple title instead of biblical theology or New Testament survey. Explain by using 5 examples how Jesus fulfills Old Testament prophecy. Summarize at least 5 major teachings of Jesus. Explain why the death and resurrection of Jesus is so important. Explain the significance of Jesus' relationship with his disciples for discipling others today. Describe 10 main events in the book of Acts and explain at least 3 of Paul's key teachings. That's knowing the scriptures. It's interesting that the AEA, in the research that David spoke to us about yesterday, have incorporated these 35 outcomes as part of the research document. Under living by faith, the second one, preach or teach effectively. Successfully explain a Bible passage to a group of people. Bear the fruit of the Spirit in all areas of life and practice humility, integrity, and simplicity. Sadly, something that is desperately missing in many parts of our pastoral communities. List, explain, and exercise the spiritual disciplines. Apply biblically ethical principles to relationships with the congregation, obviously in response to the constant fall of pastors that we hear about. Demonstrate compassion, welcome, and forgiveness in all relationships, including with people who have special needs. A recent survey in the US concluded that up to 20% of every congregation consists of people with special needs. Practice kindness and hospitality. The third group is outreach, and obviously here we're dealing with evangelism and things of that nature. Motivate others for mission. Effectively share the gospel with family, friends, and strangers. Mentor at least one person in a specific form of evangelism or mission. Explain why the Bible is more important than culture. In Africa, sadly, that is often in reverse. We have cultural Christians, people who do the right thing on a Sunday, and then on Monday they involve themselves in unacceptable cultural practices. Use technology and social media for ministry. Demonstrate servant leadership. And here's the multiplication one. Identify and train at least 3 others to serve in some form of church leadership. Under listening and encouraging, comfort and assist others in times of crisis, namely death, marital problems, illness, etc. Help a couple prepare for marriage. recount at least 7 stories in the Bible where God used children. You're aware of the 4 to 14 window movement, I'm sure, that has brought to the attention of the church the fact that for 2,000 years the church has largely forgotten children. Explain how Jesus' attitude towards children should change the church. Involve themselves in ministry to, with, and by children. This is one from the Lausanne Occasional Paper, which was developed after the 2010 meeting in Cape Town. Nurture faithfulness and love in marriage and family, and an important one, and one that many seminaries and Bible colleges tend to ignore. Describe the impact of absentee fathers. For example, in South Africa, only 30% of all children live with their biological parents. Only 30%. Trustworthy faith is the last category. Believe and practice sound doctrine. Summarize and explain the key doctrines of the New Testament. Explain 3 of the most important events in the history of the church. Describe how their denomination or church movement or independent church came into being. Behind. Explain the biblical basis for stewardship, giving, and offerings. Explain why the prosperity gospel is unbiblical and unethical. And we put in an alternative here in case there are areas where that is not the case, but I know in Africa it is the case. We have an obsession with this. And finally, describe the importance of the church, not their church, the church. Yesterday I spoke about, we wrote comprehensive notes. They're in 7 languages. There are copies here if you'd like to look at them. These are just for people who don't have any access to any curriculum whatsoever. We've helped them by providing notes for every single outcome. We also train groups of facilitators around the world. So we've done many in different parts of the world. We pay for their accommodation, we bring them to a nice training center, and we teach them very specifically on outcomes, on facilitation skills, and on assessment, of course, in particular. So a lot of people want to know about how we do assessments. So I've just included a portion of one of the assessment sheets that every facilitator has to submit for every student. Did the student attend at least 70% of the classes? Did he or she aim in everything that you required? By the end of the program, did the student demonstrate all the outcomes successfully? Can he or she now do what the outcomes require? And perhaps the most important of all, and we did this intentionally, God being your witness, are you satisfied that the student has passed this program? And they have to sign almost an oath to confirm that the student has actually passed this outcome or these outcomes. In addition, of course, we train them and we provide the materials that are necessary. So here is an example of a record sheet that we send out to them so that they can keep track of every student achieving every outcome. Here is a table, although you can't see it, of the current state of where countries are as far as the number of groups enrolled. Kenya this morning has over 550. In total, we have 2,210 groups. The majority of these larger groups come from Africa. So here is the certificate again, and yesterday I pointed out that it's also signed by the General Secretary of the World Evangelical Alliance, but it has a number of security features in it that make it impossible to copy or forge. Yesterday we heard about a seminary where a student forged a certificate in order to get a job. It has a code which no one else has access to. It has a secure number and a number of other features I'll share with you if you would like me to later when you talk to me. Here are all the languages. There are 50 of them currently where the outcomes are available. And if you click on outcomes, the tab at the top on our Re-Forma website, you will find that if you click on any of these, it automatically downloads all 35 outcomes in their language. And of course, if there's more information